This is a graphic illustration of a pilot television series for sale as an original production. This is strictly for proof of concept. We purposely did not put any sales elements in the pilot. For example, closed captioning brought to you by, or any brought to you by segments. These could easily be incorporated into the show as they are sold. Secondly, we did not put any packaging on it or graphical treatment. The idea of this pilot is to get a feel for the concept as clearly as possible with no clutter. We used already existing content to produce this pilot. If this was an original production, the talent and locations would be an intricate part of the pre-production process. This is meant to be a character-driven series, and one of the characters is the locations we travel to.
Throughout North America, outdoor enthusiasts are blessed with public access to a wide range of abundant natural resources. From pristine lakes, rivers, and streams, to woods, fields, and backyards teeming with nature's blessings. Fish, game, wild edibles galore. All part of a sustainable ecosystem where selective harvest allows family and friends to both experience the great outdoors and to bring home the elements of a fresh meal when the day is done. Whether the destination is distant and remote, lies nearby, or originates in your own backyard, every day lived in the outdoors is a unique adventure. And in time-honored tradition, Foraging Through the Outdoors shares opportunities to both enjoy nature and live off the land, much as our ancestors did in simpler times. This week, we accompany veteran anglers on a walleye fishing expedition to Upper Red Lake, Minnesota, where the blossoming fishery is managed to allow sensible harvest without stressing the walleye population. Then, we go deep into the woods with an experienced naturalist whose skills at both gathering natural ingredients and cooking delicious meals show us how to turn our catch into a gourmet delight. Now let's hook up with our seasoned walleye experts to find out where, when, and how to tap into some fantastic walleye fishing.
That feels like a real nice fish there. Oh, they got a nice one back there too. Everybody's on them.
They're starting to fire.
This one's either follow hooked or it's a really nice fish. I haven't hardly moved them.
Or it's a pike. There's some big pike known to roam these waters.
Yep. Wow, that's a good time. Feels like a nice fish. Seems like when you're trolling these cranks, you end up catching the bigger fish doing this. It selects for bigger fish more so than the jigging does. And we're gonna catch plenty of eaters along with it, but it's always fun to try and get a couple big ones. There we go. I can just slip this one in, I think, Ryan. Alrighty. This one's gonna be right on the edge of that keeper status. We definitely want a meat pack today for sure. There's a lot of fish in the system right now that are in that, say, 10 to 20 inch range, and that one's gonna fall right into the slot, which is 17. That's a good time. I like it. Let's see what it ends
Ooh,
up
that guy's
being.
really flirting with 17. No, look
Oh
at that.
man, look at that. About 16 and 7/8.
16 and 15 sixteenths.
16 and 31 30-seconds. I like it.
Here's what we do. We put them in the live well, and then our wives let us continue to do this. A lot of these big windswept walleye lakes throughout Minnesota have imposed slot limits to protect those main broodstock, those fish that are really fertile and produce the offspring. So, for example, on this lake, we can keep 4 per person under 17 inches, and then 1 over 28. And what you're doing there is protecting those key spawning fish, the ones that produce the most eggs. But we made a trip here last week and it was phenomenal. Everybody was catching a pile of fish, and we kept a limit of fish, just under 17, which is pretty outstanding on a slot lake. The lake is just chock full of them. But lakes that are of this makeup, big, as you can see, this is a huge body of water, sandy and full of gravel, are walleye factories.
Red Lake is a remnant of Lake Agassiz, a massive glacial lake drainage that long ago covered vast portions of Minnesota, North Dakota, and central Canada. At 443 square miles, Red Lake today is the 16th largest lake in the U.S. and the largest natural lake lying entirely within the state of Minnesota. Red Lake is comprised of two large basins separated by a peninsula. Lower Red and most of Upper Red lie under Native American jurisdiction, and anglers are limited to fish the eastern end of Upper Red Lake. Years ago, commercial overharvest decimated the once thriving walleye population. Native and Minnesota fisheries departments responded by closing walleye harvest for a number of years to allow the population to rebuild. During this time frame, the scarcity of walleyes simultaneously allowed the Red Lake crappie population to explode, producing legendary catches of very large fish, particularly to ice anglers. Eventually, as crappie harvest increased and the walleye population blossomed, the lake returned to more of a historic balance between the native species. Today, the lake hosts an abundant population of small to mid-sized walleyes, along with some very large trophy pike. Walleyes have once again been restored to a limited angler harvest. Large crappies are still present, but are far fewer in number. Red Lake is wide open and windswept, contributing to the reddish murky water clarity. The vast, dish-shaped main basin peaks out at about 17 feet. With limited structure other than subtle shoreline breaks and weeds, most of the fish are caught in 12 feet or less, and often considerably shallower. Walleyes also roam the main basin in search of wandering minnow forage, with large schools of fish here today and gone tomorrow. We're going to have a two-pronged approach today. One, we're going to do a lot of trolling in this lake. Like I said earlier, is gigantic, and finding fish in it can be a needle in a haystack. So you can go through this and jig, and you're probably going to run into some fish, but the system of trolling along and then putting a waypoint down every time you catch a fish makes it easy to find where the schools are.
There's a fish. There we go.
There you go.
When we come back, more walleye action from Upper Red Lake.
So a lot of beautiful leader walleyes, and you get a handful of these, it makes for a heck of a day walleye fishing. Look at that guy.
Doubled up.
And we're gonna just go ahead and mark a waypoint. So when we're done, we're gonna whip a Yui.
See?
We're gonna pull an illegal U-turn.
Cool. I like it. I got a good little eater here.
Yeah?
Yep. What do you got?
I got one of those perfect slot fish.
Ooh, yours is a little more perfect than mine.
Hey, they're not jumbos, but
No,
I'll tell you what, this gets people pretty darn excited. There's a fish. There we go.
There you go.
I'm gonna go like
Nice.
this, Mark. This one feels a little bit
It
better.
looks nice.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Oh. I have a real tendency to lose them, so I'm gonna just take it easy on this guy.
That's a nice fish.
Is it?
Yep.
See
Real
him?
nice fish. Yep. There we go. Another nice fish trolling. Beautiful. Beautiful walleye. Again, and what's so cool about this is just the simplicity of the system. I mean, the amount of water that you can cover. And we caught some fish jig fishing, and we're watching guys jig fishing, but I really think that we're catching nearly as many fish just going back and forth. And if you want to stop and take a break, you certainly can jig fish, but this is so easy. Anybody can do it. If you got a boat, you got an outboard, put the motor in gear, throw it out with your walleye rigging rod, start driving around, and you're catching fish, man. This is really a good time.
A live well filled with fresh walleyes provides the foundation for a memorable meal, especially after you add in fresh accents from the great outdoors. right after this. Harvesting fresh wild edibles from the woods around you is easier than you might think, providing you know where to look and what to look for.
Well, after a long winter, we're finally back in the woods on a beautiful spring afternoon next to the river. And we're going to go dig around and see what kind of wild edibles we can find. We're looking for ramps and fiddlehead ferns today. You can see how brown and open the woods is this time of year, and that makes the ramps and fiddlehead ferns much easier to spot because they really stick out. You can also kind of imagine what a treat it must have been for the native peoples and the first settlers in America after a winter without any fresh vegetables to be able to go out in the woods in the spring and find fresh, beautiful green vegetables like these ramps. This is the very first vegetable of the season that you can pick. Okay, here we have ramps in several different stages of growth. This is a little guy. This is another one that is still kind of coiled up. This one and this one are pretty prime specimens, and we're going to harvest this one whole. Both the leaves and the bulbs can be used. And I just use a spoon for digging. You don't want to dig a real deep hole when you're digging ramps because you want to leave the forest floor as intact as possible. And I'm kind of digging with the spoon and pulling on the ramp at the same time. And there's that nice ramp. That's a beautiful specimen right there. A characteristic of the ramp is that it's got this onion-like bulb, kind of like a green onion. It goes into a reddish burgundy stem. It has 2 or 3 leaves coming off of the bulb, inch or 2 wide, 5 or 6 inches long. And all members of the onion family should smell like onions. If they don't smell like onions, don't eat them. There are some things that look like some members of the onion family that are not onions. Now, for sustainable harvest, you can choose just to take the leaves. This is a pretty big one. We'd probably harvest the full bulb on this. But in early spring like this, you can just take the leaf part, just pinch it off or cut it off, leave some of the leaves growing to help the plant continue to grow. And these leaves are great they can be eaten raw in salads, you can cook with them, you can use them as spinach, you can do all kinds of things with them. So it's good to gather some leaves as well as some bulbs. Well, we got a beautiful harvest of ramps, enough for what I'm going to be cooking tonight. So I'm going to see if we can find some fiddlehead ferns, which is another of the vegetables that grows in the woods in the early spring. And we want to get fiddleheads at the right time. And they have a very short season because the frond gets too long, and that's not the part that you want to eat. You want to eat it when it's nice and short like this one. This is an ostrich fern, and you can see last season's growth, the brown stuff, and the new season's growth, this green growth here. The part of the fiddlehead that we want to eat, we want to catch them at this stage because we eat the curled part called the crozier and just a little bit of the stem. When the fronds uncurl, they're past the prime. And to harvest them, you just take a little knife, cut them off like that. This one's a little far gone. I don't think I'm going to take that one. So I'll take these ones. These are just perfect. Beautiful fiddlehead ferns. Now you don't want to cut everything off of each plant. You want to leave a little bit so that the plant has enough nutrition to survive this season. All right, we're out in the woods looking for morels, and what I like to look for, now there's a perfect tree right there. In this area of the country, I like to look for dead elm trees, very easy to spot because they look a little finger-like, like that tree there, quite spiky looking. And once you find an area like that, you can really start looking seriously. Other areas that are good to look for include abandoned apple orchards and areas that have had burn. You can see that there has been a fairly recent burn in this area, and that often brings morels on. All right, there's some nice mushrooms. This is one of the things I love about morel hunting is when you get into an area that has them, you often find a whole bunch at once. And you can see that there's a couple there, there's some over there, back around. They'll grow in a ring around this tree probably 10, 12 feet away from the base of the tree. So if you find some, keep looking. To take the morel, you can either cut it, which is what I'm going to do, or you can twist it off at the ground. But you really want to try and leave the base of the mushroom in because there's spores and things there that'll help next year's growth. So just hang on to it real careful. Okay, here's another one. Let's see if we can get this one. And this is a nice cluster of 4. I mean, you do see them, but not as often as you'd like to. See if I can get these off one at a time. And what you see here, this is what you often see after you've been in the woods and somebody got there before you, is you see what we call a stump. This is such a nice patch we've got here. I'm just going to take these 2 off right at the base. Oh, look at that. Okay, let's see how we're doing here. Oh boy, we've got some nice mushrooms here. I think we've got enough for what we're going to do, so let's move on.
When we return, it's time to put all our ingredients together for a scrumptious pan-fried walleye delight.
Fresh walleye pan-fried with butter. You have a sauce made of morels and ramps, including the greens, and a little bit of cream. You have fresh fiddlehead ferns in a light Asian dressing. Well, we've got some nice wild edibles that we've harvested today here, and we're going to make ourselves a little shoreside dinner. We've got some things in a cooler bag here. We've got some fiddlehead ferns. We've got some nice fresh walleye fillets. And we've got some beautiful ramps here. And a bunch of morel mushrooms. So I'll just get some of them out here so we can see what we're working with. Okay, there, what a nice bounty. And most of this stuff, we can gather these and keep them refrigerated, wrapped up in a damp paper towel in a plastic bag for a week, maybe a week and a half. Fiddleheads hold for maybe about a week at the most. The mushrooms, again, 5-6 days if they're wrapped up in damp paper towel. So you can gather these things on different days and have them all together on a meal like this. The ramps have an outer papery covering on them, much like a regular onion or like you sometimes see on a green onion. You want to remove that before you eat them. A little wet paper towel helps, or if you're doing this at home, just do it in a sink full of water. So you want to get all that off so that the bulb is nice and clean like that. Now with morels, I'll show you how to tell if what you've got is a true morel. You take the mushroom, cut it in half, and a true morel is completely hollow inside. And you can see that there's no interior matter in there at all. The cap flows smoothly down into the stem in a very smooth, rounded fashion. If you cut open something that looks like a morel and it's not completely hollow, that is what's called a false morel. That's a gyrometra, and those are fairly poisonous, so you want to absolutely avoid those. Now, the other thing we've got here is our fiddlehead ferns. And these don't need much prep at all. They sometimes have a little brownish, papery coating on the outside, which I've just rubbed off. I've already washed these in the sink at home. So these are all ready to go. Just need a quick rinse and a rub off and they're ready to go. The ramp greens are edible as well as the bulbs, and what I'm doing here is cutting them up. I've got the bulbs just sort of sliced up into little pieces. I'm going to saute those with the morels. And the greens can be eaten raw as a salad green or any kind of seasoning sort of thing. They get a little bit strong tasting as the season progresses, and they're kind of getting to that point now. As the leaves get real thick, you probably don't want to eat them raw anymore, but they're just fine for cooking. The bulbs themselves can be harvested all summer. The problem in finding them is that the leaves die back, and you have to know what the flowering part of the plant looks like later in the summer, but the bulbs can be dug all summer. Got some geese coming to visit for dinner here. Okay. Now, I gotta prime this pump. Okay, we're ready. Our water's boiling, it's hot. I'm gonna just put these in, there's nothing to it. And what you wanna do is boil them for 10 minutes and then drain them. And if you wanna eat them as a side dish cool, which is the way we're gonna be doing it, just drain them and rinse them if you've got cool water and let them cool. You can also serve them hot as a vegetable like asparagus. So this is how we're going to do it. Okay, to drain the fiddleheads, I'm going to use a little backwoods ingenuity here. This is bridal veil netting, which works just great because you can crunch it up in your pack. It's easy to dry and it doesn't burn. So now you see that darkness in the water? That's tannin. And that's one of the good reasons to boil fiddleheads before you eat them, because it takes the tannin out. I'm just going to lift this out. Voila, there's all our tannin, if you can see that. And then I can just get rid of this water. And I'm going to put the fiddleheads back into their pot. I've got a light little dressing that I've made. It's an Asian style dressing, but you could easily use an Italian or a French style dressing. This one is made out of a little bit of soy sauce, a couple tablespoons of soy sauce, a tablespoon or so of sesame seeds. It's got a tablespoon of sesame oil and a little bit of cayenne pepper and about a teaspoon of sugar. Like I say, you easily use a French dressing or an Italian dressing or any kind of thing like that. This is meant to be eaten at room temperature, and it's just going to marinate while we fix our fish. So I'm going to set that aside and start working on the fish. I've got a hot cast iron skillet, and I'm going to add a little bit of butter to that. There's nothing like cast iron for cooking fish, and I know it's a pain to take into the woods, but boy, if you can do it, it's really worth taking. All right, here's our fresh walleye fillets, and we've got our butter sizzling in our pan. I've just got a little flour mixture that I bring along for this kind of fish frying. And it's just flour, a little bit of cornmeal, some paprika, a little bit of seasoning mix, black and white pepper, that kind of stuff, whatever you like. And this is really the easiest way to do this sort of thing in the woods. Just put the fish in the bag, give it a good little swish like that, nicely coated. Okay, you can hear that butter sizzling. Now we're ready to go. There's our fish. Oh, doesn't that look nice? Yeah. Nothing like fresh walleye. Now our pan's nice and hot, and our butter's hot, so that's going to sizzle and get a nice crust. This cooks surprisingly fast. It really cooks in 5 to 10 minutes. It doesn't take any more than that. So we're going to make a quick morel sauce while we do that. I'm going to get my second burner going here. There we go. All right. Get that pan going. And a little chunk of butter here. Now this second burner on this Coleman stove is much cooler than the first one, and I want the fish on the hotter burner, so this is definitely a cooler burner, and that's fine for what we're doing here. We want a gentle heat for what we're doing. All right, we're going to put the ramps in with our sizzling butter. And once we've got the ramps going, I'm going to finish cutting up my morels, but I got to get those ramps started. Oh, that fish looks good, doesn't it? Oh, nothing like fresh walleye, I'll tell you. Okay, let's get this batch of morels started. We can add more later if we want. Our ramps are starting to get very fragrant now. That's one of the signs that they're getting cooked properly, is they get very fragrant. Okay, I'm going to scoop these into the pan. Oh, look at how nice those look. This is such a springtime treat, I'll tell you. I flip-flop the skillet onto the cooler burner because I want the morels to get a little bit of time on the warmer burner now. The fish is almost done. And I'm going to cook the morels here until they start releasing their liquid, which will happen pretty fast. You can see the morels starting to release a little bit of their liquid there. What we want to do is get them to release their liquid and then cook it until that liquid is evaporated off. That's the best flavor that you're going to get. So we're really moving along now. Okay, I'm ready to add some of my sliced ramp greens to my morels. Add a little color and a nice flavor, which a lot of people say that ramps have a flavor very similar to shallots. I think that's a good way to describe it. It's a cross between an onion and a garlic. Oh, look how pretty that is. That is just beautiful. Okay, now you see how fast those wilt down? Ramp greens cook just as quickly as spinach. All right, we're going to make a creamy sauce here. And I'm going to use a little can of evaporated milk today. You can use cream, you can use milk, you can use evaporated skim milk, whatever you want. The canned evaporated milk like this is nice because it's easy to carry out into the field like this. It doesn't need refrigeration. So that's what we're going to use. And I'm just going to put that right in the sauce. Give that a little stir. Oh, does that look good? Our fish is done. It's just on a holding pattern. Now the fish is just staying warm. It's not really cooking any longer. All right, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of the same flour mixture in there that I used to bread the fish. This will just thicken the sauce. And at home, you go through all kinds of steps to make sure it doesn't get lumpy. In the wild, you just put it in and hope for the best. Stir that in. Let that thicken up. It should take about a minute. and then we'll be ready. What we're going to have is we're going to have our fiddlehead fern side dish with an Asian dressing. We're going to have fresh pan-fried walleye with morel and ramp green sauce. All right, let's plate this up. Here's some nice walleye. Oh, and some morel sauce. Make a nice little band with that. Oh, doesn't that look good? That is, oh, I wish you could smell it. It smells so good. Morels have their own unique smell. Okay, let's put a little bit of our fiddlehead ferns on there. And I think we're ready to eat. There you go. You have fresh walleye pan-fried with butter. You have a sauce made of morels and ramps, including the greens, and a little bit of cream. You have fresh fiddlehead ferns in a light Asian dressing.
There's a fish. There we go.
There you go.
Armed with a bit of outdoor knowledge, backed by selective harvest from the woods and waters, you can continue to have your catch and eat it too. Fresh fish are a nutritious, delicious, renewable resource, especially when teamed with freshly picked wild edibles, complements of the great outdoors. And that wraps up this edition of Foraging Through the Seasons. We'll see you next time when nature's seasonal delights once again grace our sustainable menu.
Okay. It's got two. I like the heat that it gives off too.